Could you imagine you bought a new vehicle from a reliable brand, 2 years later the engine blows up? Could you also imagine waiting 3 years after a major refresh because people advised you and said never buy the first year of the change, and unfortunately those engines blew up too? Here, as we roll in 2026, there's still a handful of manufacturers that still can't quite get it right. Engines are failing, recalls are mounting, and customers are devastated. I'm going to give you a list of 5 of those manufacturers with engines that are still catastrophically failing. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. Unfortunately, Lexus and Toyota is the first brand, and the LX600 is just one of those models that has that engine under the hood that's been a problem for some time. Back in 2022, we saw a whole rash of owners of new Tundras, which carries that same engine. A V35A, which is a 3.4 liter twin turbo V6 direct injected. It was going to be an engine that created all kinds of better performance and was going to be the answer for better fuel economy than the outgoing 5.7 liter V8. Sadly, this engine's been a bit of a problem. According to Car Complaints, an owner of an LX600 model very similar to this owned his SUV, was proud, drove it away, and unfortunately experienced a catastrophic engine failure due to an outstanding issue that engine has had. It took 150 days to get some sort of resolution, which resulted in engine replacement. There's been lots of discussions about poor fueling, about bad design, bad engineering, but most importantly, metal particulate that's been caught up in the engine and didn't get properly cleaned out during the manufacturing process. But this has been going on since 2022, 3, 4, 5, and now 2026, there's even more recalls. The problems didn't begin and end with the Lexus LX600. It also translated to the Toyota Tundra, which has been a big problem for many owners and a lot of customers getting full engine replacements, short block, long block. There's been lots of discussion as to what the real problem is, but Toyota Tundra owners, because of the vast numbers produced, they've seen over 100,000 vehicles recalled. The latest news is there's 127,000 vehicles now included in this recall. This model here, the Lexus GX 550, which utilizes the same 3.4 liter twin turbo V6, has been pulled into the vortex of despair. And we know that this was sort of the elephant in the room. We know that this was a high probability of failure. This is essentially very similar as the Toyota Land Cruiser, but you get a 30-row, you get the V6, much better level of performance. You get nice touches, all kinds of great step guards, and lots of great detailing. Now, generally, Toyota's trusted as creating some of the most reliable vehicles on the planet, but they've had some serious struggles with this 3.4 liter. And here I'm standing in front of another model. This is the brand new Sequoia. Now this currently, as far as I can tell, is not part of the recall. Why wouldn't it be? It also carries the same 3.4 liter V6 as the Tundra, and on top of it, they're both made in Texas and or Indiana. And so what else is different? Just like the GX, which was not part of that original recall, I have to personally believe that this may in fact be a further addition to their recall. Now, this isn't formal yet. This is just my assumption, but I believe this is the latest model by Toyota with the great bold front end. And you got to believe that this is essentially an oversized, overgrown Toyota Tundra. It has a lot of the great parts and components, and historically, the models like the Sequoia have generally been based on this Tundra. So why would it not be essentially the same problem, the same series of issues that we've seen in the Tundras? I have to believe that it may in fact be part of that. So as a cautionary tale, as we roll into 2026, with all of these discussions about whether there's metal particulate in the engines, about how long it's taking some customers to get their engines replaced, or whatever the solution is long term, the bottom line is look all over, tons and tons of conversation about people with bad engines, rod knocks, engines shutting down, catastrophic failures, and everything pretty much in between. Unfortunately, Toyota, we know that they can make a great engine, but sadly, that twin turbo 3.4 liter V6 just is still a huge problem in 2026. If you were to tell me 25 years ago that General Motors trucks wouldn't last 60,000, 80,000 miles, I'd laugh in your face. But a lot of the current generation models, the 5.3s, the 6.2s in General Motors, Chevy full-size pickup trucks and SUVs simply are not lasting. Now, while there's a relatively small number in that 5 to 8 to 10% failure rate, the fact remains is there's a way too many issues with a lot of these engines, and many people have to recall and question the quality that a lot of these vehicles are putting out these days. These manufacturers are generating vehicles that definitely are nice, they're pretty, they have all the great technology with LEDs on the big screens inside, sunroof and heated seats, but unfortunately a lot of them just don't have what it takes, a long-lasting engine. Still to this day, that the L87, which is the 6.2 liter V8 engine in a Tahoe, or you find it in the Cadillac Escalade, or many other models, the full-size trucks, are often experiencing big problems. The 6.2 liter engine, we're up over 1 million recalls because because of catastrophic engine failures or a high probability. Now, sure, General Motors has a bit of an administration. They can check and do a deviation test. Now they're also administering a heavier duty or grade of oil because the EPA and the standards dictates and asks them to put in a lighter oil, and some say that that's actually part of the contributing factor, that the super thin watery type oil is a contributing factor. The point is there's been way too many of the 6.2 liter V8 engine failures, but it's also the 5.3s that are having lifter issues. And so you're getting a rocker issue problem because of the cylinder deactivation, carbon fouling, and now what you ultimately land is ticking, snapping lifters, and sadly that results in big engine replacements or partial head replacements. It's an engine job, and quite often it's thousands of dollars out of pocket. So you're way beyond a million potential recalls or engines that are under scrutiny of quality replacements. To believe that in this day and age, with modern technology, engineering, and learnings from the past, that many of these manufacturers simply could not get this right after all these years, when they used to be able to build reliable engines like first generation 5.3 or the old 5.7 liter V8 from way back, or the old 305s, engines that would last literally forever, and many of them are still on the road today. So General Motors, the 6.2 L87, the 5.3s, clearly some of the most unreliable engines in my own personal opinion. And as we roll around the calendar year, I can't believe we still see these issues. Volkswagen struggled for many years as well. And the engine that they use in both the base model Jetta as well as the Taos are what they call the EA211. Now, it's been around for almost 15 years in different configurations. Of course, some are 3, some are 4-cylinder engines. But these latest generation are a 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. That's right, 4 cylinders of carbon fouling oil burning technology. Because these vehicles here, a lot of people love them when they're brand new, out of the box. They're cheap, they're throwaway cars, and that's essentially what they are. I've also commented one of the only cars I would buy would be the GLI version of the Jetta because it's a manual. You can also get the better upgraded engine. Base trim like this, these are not particularly reliable. Things like kangarooing, so they hop and they jump when they're cold. There were some recalls with fuel leaks and some issues early on, so they were already showing quality control challenges. A lot of these vehicles, sure, they get the greatest technology, they look great, but a lot of people find out very soon after that there's lots of problems. Things like the integrated water pump and thermostat, they're plastic and they are well known to fail. Carbon fouling, there's also a timing belt, so instead of a chain, these ones use a timing belt. Oil burning technology 101, and because it's direct injected on both of these engines, you're typically going to find issues with heavy carbon fouling. Of course, that then leads to issues around the valves, turbochargers, wastegates. It's a variable geometry turbocharger, so the technology is very advanced in these cars, and yet if you sustain a failure and if you don't do your oil services, that's the quick, fast way to see a failure in these engines. They're small, 1.5, they're working extremely hard, and when they fail, and they do, these are one of the least reliable engines in the market currently today. Now, they're a great looking little vehicle and the price point is right, but you've really got to stick with the maintenance, and that's part of the issue. The ongoing problem with a lot of these engines, they're too small, they're going smaller, and sadly, direct injection, turbocharging, small displacement means that they're a literal recipe for disaster, and the Volkswagen product line generally has more than their share of problem areas. The EA211, they just need to ante up, make it a little more durable, make it a little bit more reliable, get rid of some of that plastic under the hood like the water pump, because you can't afford to overheat these engines. The small base engines in some of these vehicles like the Bronco Sport, the Escape, a lot of these vehicles now still carry a couple of different engines. One of which, of course, is the EcoBoost Turbo 3-cylinder engine, and the another one is the Turbo 4-cylinder engine EcoBoost. Now, the Turbo 4 is a 2-liter engine. Some of the issues were the open deck design. It could leak coolant into the engine compartment, burn it, and ultimately you wind up seeing a puff and billow of smoke coming out the backside, white smoke. Sometimes misfiring, sometimes catastrophic engine failures, or even just rough running are some conditions that you'd often see with some of the turbo 2-liter EcoBoost engines. They weren't built for longevity. They were efficient, they were better on fuel, they had a little bit more power than even the base 2.5s earlier on. But the 2-liter EcoBoost engine, even though with some improvements, it still hasn't been that amazing. The transmission has also been somewhat problematic, but the bigger issue is the engines that you find, the 1.5-liter turbo 3-cylinder engine, the EcoBoost, found in the Bronco, or more in the Escape, and you'll find it in many of these vehicles as the base trim engine. Unfortunately, has a very similar problem. Turbocharger failures, seizing up. Of course, you're talking about $3,000-$4,000 repair there. The problem is open deck design means the cooling system winds up allowing coolant to passage its way down into the engine in the combustion chamber, and again have an issue with the white smoke billowing out the backside. The Escape is one of those vehicles, very popular. There's lots of on the road, and a lot of people love them. The hybrid versions are a little bit better. With the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, you also get a slight improvement, but the base 1.5 liter turbo 3-cylinder engine has been a big problem. Oil consumption, carbon fouling, and it's just not that great of a motor. The worst part is there was an outstanding recall with the direct injected injectors that would potentially crack, and they were leaking fuel. NHTSA said, nuh-uh, but ultimately Ford said, you know what we're gonna do is we'll put a little drain pipe there. If it leaks, it'll drain down and away from the hot engine parts so it didn't ignite a fire. Well, guess what? That wasn't good enough. NHTSA said we need more. Ford, they decided to add a little bit of a patch, the software patch, in conjunction with that little hose. The patch was there to detect a sudden pressure drop in the fuel system, and then effectively the idea was for it to drop off and shut the vehicle off, stop delivering fuel. But what do you think that happens? You're driving down the freeway, the vehicle detects a leak, and it decides to turn the vehicle off while you're driving. That doesn't seem like a great idea. The bottom line is the turbo 1.5s, the turbo 2-liter EcoBoost engines have not been all that durable. They're popular, there's lots of them out there, but there's outstanding recalls. Some people argue that the V6 turbo EcoBoost engines are a little better, and they are slightly better, but some of the engines, the 2.7s, the 3 liters, the 3.5s found in some of the full-size trucks as well as the full-size Broncos are slightly better than what you're finding with the 3 and the 4-cylinder EcoBoost. But ultimately, with these ongoing standing issues, transmission problems, even though they're sold and they're very popular in the numbers, it's largely because it's a price point vehicle. Many customers have to put up with the fact of oil burning, coolant consumption, problems, recalls, and remember, Ford seems to be holding the recall king crown right now, the crown of thorns as it were. So at the end of the day, the Ford EcoBoost, the 3 and a 4-cylinder, we also know with the EcoSport engines, and of course the wet belt system was not all that dependable either, and there was engines catastrophically failing. Literally a dumpster fire on wheels. Most EcoBoost engines also have a plethora of issues: turbocharger failures, wastegate problems, timing chains, oil pumps, cam phasers because they're variable valve timing systems, and a whole host of other generic problems that seem to afflict Ford much more than many other manufacturers. Another manufacturer with engines I would extremely approach with caution: Nissan, because they're variable compression motors. 443,000 vehicles plus are included in a recall that up to and including 2024. Why not 2025? Again, I say approach with caution because where you smell smoke, there's sometimes fire. Currently, there's no recalls for the 25 model years. I have to believe that the Infinities, of course, Nissan Altima, as well as the Nissan Rogues are part of a recall. That's right. Rod bearings, a big problem with some of these engines. For the 1.5 or the 2-liter variable compression motors have had some major issues, potentially eating themselves up from the bottom side in. What's wrong with going with a conventional connecting rod? They use a variety of different joints and fittings to actually make this variable compression. It's a new technology. They're trying to be innovative, but they've had some problems with that engine. High pressure turbocharging, direct injection means that they've had a lot of problems. And the Nissan Rogue is a popular little model, and they've really been pushing them out the door. But unfortunately, I even personally know somebody who's got a brand new Nissan Rogue, and they've already had to take it in for some weird drivability problems and a catastrophic failure just almost imminent. They bought it under the assumption that huge incentives were going to get them a great car, but sadly, the new Nissan Rogue has been plagued with issues. Now, allegedly, the 2024 and older model years of some of these Rogues and Altimas and Infinities means that what they're going to do is drop the belly pan, look for debris in the belly pan, and of course, if they see debris, then that means they may replace an engine. If they don't see debris, in some of the models, they may in fact just do an oil change. In some of the 1.5s, they may in fact do a full flush, a gasket change, as well as a whole new ECU. The Nissan Rogue and many other models are subject to this 400,000 plus recalls. And I'm a little bit nervous because even the continuously variable transmission that's outfitted in a lot of these cars called the Jatco has had some minor improvements, but one little catastrophic failure, and there's been many to report in previous history, could cost you $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for full replacement, because many techs simply cannot fix or will not fix them. They do take a little extra maintenance, but unfortunately a lot of them just don't have the longevity built behind them. As we roll into 2026, I can't help but worry about an engine like that, and certainly I would do my homework, on any further recalls. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for some big problems coming down the chute. Where there's 2023-24 model year issues, I gotta think 2026 and 5, who knows? With all of that said, everybody, thanks again so much. Hope to see each and every one on the next one. If you want some reliable picks right there, those are my favorites if you're looking for a car in those spaces. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.